The thing is, guys and girls, this human experience is a tiered experience. There's many levels. There are many levels to the levels of consciousness which we have as a species. There is much to be said for the new soul, old soul. It's very, very obvious to see when you become acquainted with these terminologies through the relevant information. Now, the world in general, of course, is tied in to the ego. The ego being the operating system of the fiction of being a human being. We have to have the ego to enable consciousness to create the fiction of a reality. But low conscious beings, they only have that. They haven't been awoken to their soul and to their spirit and to the connection to cosmic consciousness. So when we look around and we see the masses trying to solve problems with their very limited toolbox, they'll never solve the problems. Now, when we learn about human psychology, we learn a level. And if people think that that's the only level, and we have psychiatrists, we have psychologists, and very often they are so deeply entrenched in their training and study that they can't go outside. Now, psychiatrists, of course, cannot go outside of the pharmaceutical realm because they are bought and sold. They are born from the pharmaceutical companies. Psychiatrists are born out of them. They are birthed out of that business. And the only thing that they can do is prescribe within the parameters of that stuff, of their masters. Now, psychiatrists are psychologists also. But they are bound by their label of psychiatry into the imprisonment of prescribing poisons only and no natural remedies. They are not allowed, not permitted in any shape or form to prescribe natural remedies. That's the realm of the homeopath or the free psychologist. Psychiatrists are not free. They're bound and tethered. So we can outrule them for any notion that they can help us in any soul-like way or spiritual way. Now, the difficulty being, people, that this human experience is a very, very complex one, and if we do not realize our soul, if we do not realize our spirit, then we will not take in those two very, very, very important facets of what it is to be human being. We won't take those facets into the equation when we're looking for the answers. If you're only looking for the answers within your ego, within the realms of the fiction of the material world, then you are very limited. And to know human psychology is a good thing. There's lots we can derive from it, but it isn't the be-all and the end. Now, in the past there were people like Sigmund Freud who were deeply, deeply steeped in the fiction of the ego. Freud knew nothing of the spiritual. He didn't want to go there at any cost because he was just too bound within the realm of his own fiction and his own ego, his own self-belief. You know, he just wouldn't do to speak about anything else. And these are the words he used with Carl Jung. When Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist, psychologist, a spiritualist, and can you say a mythologist? Jung was a very complex individual because he delved into all different sorts of stuff. He delved into mythology, he delved into alchemy, he delved into witchcraft and all that different sort of stuff. He was a very well-read and educated person. But he was operating within the realm of psychiatry and psychology, so he had to keep things a little bit tame. But for those of you who know about Jung's work, and are acquainted with his latest work, which he never published, a family member published it, the Red Book, then you will see that he was very, very deeply seated in mythology and the spiritual realms with all different sorts of entities and beings and all the rest of it. So if we're going to get abreast of what we are as human beings, then we most certainly have to be self-realized souls. It's not like the human being has a soul. No, we are soul who have a human form, who are having a human experience. We are spirits having a soulful experience, which is having a human egoic experience. So fundamentally, at the highest level of the hierarchy, we are cosmic consciousness, which is cosmic spirit. And then when it fragments down into multiple dreams, aka human beings, then we have a dream reality within our minds, and we have certain beliefs and structures, and there are certain rules and parameters to our dream, just like there are in your everyday dream world. When you dream, there's certain parameters. Sometimes you can fly, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you are invincible, sometimes you feel as if you have been compromised and vanquished, and you can get butchered, shot, and all different sorts of things in your dreams. And so things are very, very varied. But when we look at the ego, which is the lowest of the low in the hierarchical system, the ego is coupled with a new soul. A new soul comes into the ego and has an earth experience, and due to the lack of experience with a new soul, it doesn't know anything. It's its first time in planet Earth, and so the human form which the soul is inhabiting has to experience. And it's very naive, it's very fear-based, and it has a very narrow, myopic consciousness, whereby older souls, they increase in their wisdom and their knowledge because the soul retains that information. Or at least the spirit retains the information. Now it's a pretty grey area between whether the soul retains the information or whether the spirit retains the information. And when the soul is reborn, does that contain the information, or does it tap into the spirit as a mother ship for the information, like with an umbilical cord? Does it do that? Who knows? How can we ever really know for sure about this stuff? But what I'm ever increasingly convinced of, people, is that we can most certainly not answer all of our issues and questions with the human operating system, the ego, because it is very, very bereft of an extended level of knowing, of cosmic consciousness. Now, when we acquaint ourselves with cosmic consciousness, when the spirit and the soul work in unison with one another, then the ego, which is sharing the journey, will be less prominent. So initially, with new souls, the ego is very prominent because it is the be-all and the end as far as the new soul's concerned, because the new soul is very naive, it doesn't have any information. Just let's say like the new soul is a blank motherboard, and it comes to have an earth experience, and so the ego has to write upon the soul all the information that it has learned throughout its life. Then when the body dies, the soul goes back to source, comes back again with something written on the motherboard. However, the body that it enters into isn't aware of that, but it can gain access to it once it becomes awakened. Now, the whole awakening process is a very, very complex process, and nobody for sure will know how it happens, how it manifests, and all the rest of it. But what I can say from my experience, being an awakened soul, knowing the difference between me and many other people who are not awakened, who know nothing of their soul, who know nothing of their spirit, who know nothing of their cosmic consciousness, who know nothing that they are in actual fact shards of God consciousness. They know nothing of that. And so when you do know that, when you are self-realized soul, then you can look upon those and you can see the deficit that they have, you see. And so with the hierarchical system of young souls and old souls, there's a great deal in between, constituting thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of sojourns to planet Earth. Now, of course, none of us will know how many sojourns we've had, but what I know for certain, and I've always known, that there is a great difference in my awareness, my intuition, my consciousness, my soul, my spirit, than the vast majority of people around me. And I very, very seldom come upon someone who is on par with me. And, you know, lots of people don't like to hear this sort of stuff. But I can see it. I can feel it, I can intuit it. When I watch and listen to other people, I go, they know, they know, they know. Old souls, been around the cosmos for billions of years, this, that and the other. They know exactly where it's at. And so I'm speaking in recent times about this guy called Morg. What's his name? Morg something. But, you know, and I look at this, the name Morg. I mean, Morg, it means mortuary. You know, where is he born to have a name like that? What does his name mean? Where he's born? If he's Scandinavian, if he's Russian, I don't know where he's from. But a name like that, either it's an invented name, or in his own language, it means something else. But when you look into the lineage of words, invariably they'll go back to the same root. And so morgue is a very unusual word, isn't it? There's not many words that, you know, relate to morgue except mortuary and death and these sort of things. So I don't know why he calls himself Death, or a place where death resides. I don't know, people, there's so many things. It'd be interesting to ask him one day. Maybe I'll ask him in the comments. But many people will be under the misconception that it's all about nature and nurture in this landscape, in this paradigm, in this dimension. And people will be thinking, well, we're like we are because first and foremost of the DNA which was passed on to us, and so we have certain attributes of our ancestors, and there's nothing we can do about that. And then there's the whole nurturing thing, what continent was born in, what country, what culture, how we've been hypnotized and propagandized, and how we've been traumatized, and if we've had beautiful, blissful childhoods and all this sort of thing, then we are a manifestation of that, and what we will reflect back onto the world will be a manifestation of that. However, there is something else which runs very, very deep, and then it pertains to the soul, the amount of times the soul has come back and how wise and old the soul is, you see. Because the wisdom of the soul will supersede the nature and the nurture. So if you have, let's say, one human which was a very young soul, then they would have no awareness of their soul. It takes time to be acquainted with the soul. That's a spiritual endeavour and a spiritual journey. So the newbies all around us, they've got no idea, and they will deny their soul and spirit, and they'll think that they're just little old human beings, right? But when we become more mature in the cosmos, then we know that we are soul, or at least we are spirit, having a soulful experience, which pertains to the ego and all humanisms. And so when we're looking to solve issues, people, we really do have to raise up in the hierarchical system. Because there's many issues that the human being has that we cannot solve with the ego. We cannot solve with human psychology. And I've learned this throughout my life, dealing with many people who just don't seem to be able to get outside of the trap that they are within. They can't elevate themselves from their new soul. That's what I'm saying, people. The difference is this. You know, when people are depressed, when they're anxious and this, that and the other, lots of people can say, oh yeah, well, childhood and this, that and the other. And I say to you, well, look, with my childhood, there are many occasions when, you know, I was traumatised. I've been traumatised many occasions in my life. And one would have thought, well, with all that trauma that I have been subject to, well, I would just completely have lost it and gone off the rails and would have killed myself 10 times over. Or I would be a heroin addict or a male prostitute. I'll be doing something because I've got no respect for my body at all. Au contraire, I have the greatest of respect for my body because I know that I am God. And so how is it that I know that over and above everybody else who has fallen foul of drugs and prostitution and lack of willpower and terror and anxiety and all the rest of it? What's the difference, people? The difference absolutely has to pertain to the length and breadth and the agedness of the soul, the maturity of the soul. That's the way I'm looking at things now, because that's the greatest semblance to any realism that I can conclude with all this. Because looking deeply into human psychology and working with people and painting things very clear and plain, and yet they still can't get it, they still can't grasp it, they still can't work with it. They just go, oh, I don't know, oh, I don't know, oh, that's all right for you. They're absolutely stuck in this cognitive paradigm of evil, the lowest of the human experience. And they will be manipulated, they will be beguiled, they will be controlled. Just look around you, that's what's going on. And so I can only think that the people that run the world, they're very old souls. And who knows whether they're nefarious old souls or whether they really have some level of benevolence, which they just think like a father figure that they know best for human beings. But how can we know best for everybody? That's the difficulty, isn't it? You know, how can a father know what's best for like 20 children under the same household? Because all the children are different. Some are young souls, some are old souls. And so how could one father, of whatever age soul he is, lay governance and proclaim that he knows the best for his children just because the human form of the children are younger? Because there could be many souls which are vastly older than the father. You see? So, when we're looking to discover what we are and why we do it, we, of course, will take on board the nature and the nurture. When we become more evolved, we then take on board the soul. When we become more evolved than that, we take on board the spirit and the collective God cosmic consciousness. We take on board that, knowing that ultimately that's what we are. We are cosmic consciousness. The thing that is conscious, the consciousness, people. It's the consciousness which is cosmic consciousness. The consciousness isn't in anything per se. The consciousness just is. The cosmos is conscious. Everything is conscious, and there's been millions of people speaking about planets and stars and all the rest of it being conscious, and everything being conscious. And in view of the fact that we haven't got a freaking clue what consciousness is, then why couldn't it or shouldn't it be? So, let me wrap this one up. When we're looking at trying to get some respite on how the body is feeling because it's under the jurisdiction of a very naive ego and a young soul, well, what can we do about that? We can't do anything about that at all because we don't have the wisdom. The soul hasn't made itself present. It hasn't made itself apparent to the ego. The ego knows nothing of a soul. The ego just is enveloped in its own dullness and its own myopic mindset. It's not until the soul has come back many times that the soul will then become acquainted with the ego. The ego will become acquainted with the soul because the soul needs to speak to the ego and educate it, you see, because it's ready. And then we have a whole different outlook on the world and what it is to be and all the rest of the stuff. And then we realise what we should be listening to, what we should be learning, what we should be experiencing and what we shouldn't do and all this different sort of stuff, because we realise that we're in a school, a cosmic school for souls, people. And it's a soul evolutionary system. And when we are evolved souls, then we can look down in not a derogatory way, because it's not a hierarchical system which is built on merit. It's a hierarchical system which comes about by the longevity of the age of the soul. You see, and so some souls are older than others, so you can't go, oh, you're shit little baby soul, because we were shit little baby souls once also. What can we do? Try to help them. You see, this is one of the highest levels of what it is to be a self-realised soul in this cosmos, and that's to devote yourself to helping other people. Now, I'm devoting myself, a lot of my time and energy goes into offering souls the opportunity to gain knowledge and help them along with the acquisition of their wisdom, which is their own personal experience. You see, I can't give you personal experience. I can't give you wisdom. I can impart my wisdom whereby you can think about it and you can intellectualize it, and you can bear it in mind and you can remember it, and then you can equate it to something which you've learned and experienced yourself. And some of the things I say, you go, I've experienced that, Aaron. I know exactly what you're saying. Therefore, then, I'm not imparting wisdom to you because you already know it. But if I say something to you and you go, I don't believe that, or that's bullshit, this, that, and the other, well, maybe one day you'll experience something, and then you go, oh, the Awakened Brave told us that. And so, now I know it to be true because it's a reality for me, you see. So the whole thing about the wisdom is the agedness of our cosmic soul. And, we can look around the world and we can see that there's been, many old souls, and they've tried to impart information. And you could say things like Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, and modern gurus of whatever, caliber they are. They evidently are older souls than the majority. And that's why they gravitate to the guru. They gravitate to the rabbi. They gravitate to the Messiah, to the teacher, that's their job. That's ultimately what they have to do. Because you cannot gather all the information, all the wisdom yourselves and go, thanks, right, see you, bye. It doesn't work like that. You've got to pay it back, pay it forward. You've got to pay somehow, people. And this is why I'm always telling you that I'm compelled to do this. It's just a part of what it is to be an old soul. I don't have any choice about it. I never have had. And so anyway, think about what I'm saying here, people, and think about how you're receiving it. Are you receiving it? Does it mean something to you? Is it touching you deeply within your breast? And if it does, you might need to start researching more about this to become more acquainted with it. And if you are rejecting it, it's because you're not ready for it. So continue on your journey. Maybe in 1,000 more reincarnations, you'll be ready for information like what I've been espousing. And so, each to their own, people. This is just how it is.